You've heard it on the news a million times, right? GDP is up, GDP is down. It's this one number that seems to decide if we're in a boom or a bust. But what on earth is it really? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on gross domestic product and figure out what this all-important number is all about. I mean, think about it for a second. How do you check the health of an entire country's economy? It's not like you can just look outside and get a sense of it. You need some kind of tool, kind of like an economic thermometer. And that's exactly the problem that economists needed to solve. Their answer? GDP. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll get the big picture on why we even bother measuring economies. Then, we'll properly introduce GDP, our main statistic. We're going to break down its definition word by word, look at the 4 pieces that make it up, learn a super important distinction, and then wrap up by asking, is this number really everything? So before we dive straight into GDP, let's just zoom out for a second. We need to understand the goal. What are economists who study the whole economy, macroeconomists? What are they actually trying to achieve? It pretty much boils down to 3 main things. They want the country to be making a lot of stuff and making more of it over time. They want lots of people to have jobs, and they want prices to be stable, not swinging wildly up or down. GDP is the main way we track that very first goal, output. So yeah, when it comes to economic stats, GDP it's the big one. It's the undisputed heavyweight champion. It's the most important single number we have to get a snapshot of a country's economic health. And here's what's so clever about it. GDP measures 2 things at the exact same time. It measures the total income of everyone in the economy and the total amount spent on everything. How can it do that? Well, think about it. Every single dollar you spend is a dollar of income for somebody else. They're 2 sides of the very same coin. Okay, so we've got the general idea, but the official definition of GDP is super, super precise. Literally, every single word in it has a specific job to do. So let's put this thing under a microscope and see what it's really made of. And there it is. I know, it looks like something straight out of a textbook, but don't worry about it. We're going to go through this piece by piece, and by the end, it's going to make perfect sense, I promise. First up, market value. I mean, you can't just add 1 car to 10 haircuts, right? The numbers wouldn't mean anything. So instead, GDP uses prices, what things actually sell for in the market, to give everything a common value, a dollar value. That way, you can actually add it all up into one big, meaningful number. Okay, this word final is absolutely crucial. Imagine you buy a greeting card. GDP counts the price you paid for that card. What it doesn't do is also count the price of the paper that the company bought to make the card. Why? Because the value of the paper is already included in the final price of the card. This is to avoid double counting, which would make the economy look way bigger than it actually is. This one's pretty straightforward. GDP only cares about stuff that's being made right now. So if a new car is built this year, yep, that's in this year's GDP. But if you go and buy a used car from 2015, that sale doesn't count. The car wasn't produced this year. It just changed hands. This is the domestic and gross domestic product. It's all about geography. It measures whatever is produced inside a country's borders, and it doesn't matter who owns the company. So, a Honda built in a factory in Ohio, that counts for US GDP. A Ford built in a factory in Mexico, that counts for Mexico's GDP. Simple as that. And finally, GDP is what we call a flow. It's not a snapshot of a country's total wealth. It's a measure of activity over a specific chunk of time, usually a quarter, so 3 months, or a whole year. It's kind of like measuring how much water is flowing through a pipe every minute, not the total amount of water sitting in the lake. Okay, so we've totally dissected the definition. We know what it is. But how do economists actually, calculate the number? Well, they add up all the spending in the economy, which they've neatly sorted into 4 big buckets. And here is the famous equation that does all the work. Y is just the symbol for GDP. And it equals the sum of these 4 letters, C, I, G, and NX. So pretty much every dollar spent fits into one of these categories. C is consumption. That's us, buying groceries, movie tickets, anything. I is investment. That's businesses buying new equipment or a family buying a brand new house. G is government purchases, like building roads or paying soldiers. And finally, NX is net exports, which is just the stuff we sell to other countries minus the stuff we buy from them. Add them all up, and boom, you get GDP. Now, we've got to talk about a really critical distinction. If you hear GDP went up, you need to ask a smart question. Did we actually make more stuff, or did prices just go up? And that's the whole difference between what we call nominal and real GDP. So, nominal GDP uses today's prices. The problem is it can go up just because of inflation, even if we produce the exact same amount of stuff. Real GDP is the hero here. It uses prices from some fixed year in the past. This strips out the effect of inflation. So if real GDP goes up, you know for sure the country is genuinely producing more. That's why it's the number economists really care about. Let's make this crystal clear with the super simple economy. In 2021, they make 100 milks at $1 each and 50 honeys at $2 each. Total GDP, $200. Now fast forward to 2023. Look what happened. The prices for both milk and honey have doubled, but the amount they're producing is exactly the same. Nominal GDP skyrockets to $400. It looks like the economy is twice as big, but real GDP, which still uses those 2021 prices, is still $200. It tells the true story. No actual growth happened. Okay, so we've seen just how powerful and useful GDP is. But we have to finish up with a little reality check. As great as it is for measuring economic production, it is not a perfect measure of how well a society is actually doing. And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? A bigger GDP usually does mean a higher standard of living, better healthcare, more opportunities, things like that. But it doesn't capture everything that we value, everything that makes life good. Think about it. GDP doesn't care about your free time. If we all worked 80 hours a week, GDP would go up. But would we be better off? Probably not. If a factory pollutes a river to make stuff, GDP goes up, but our environment gets worse. And GDP totally ignores the incredible value of a parent staying home to raise their kids, or a volunteer at a soup kitchen, just because there's no price tag attached. So let's just leave you with this idea to chew on. GDP is an absolutely essential tool. It's like the economic price tag of a nation, but it can't measure a country's true value. And knowing the difference, understanding both the power and the blind spots of this world-moving number, that is the key to using it wisely.